A lot of you guys already know that I got perfect scores on the GRE and on the GMAT, and that I finished both tests well over an hour early. For those of you who don't know what those tests are, the GRE and GMAT they're like the SAT. You take them after college. They're a little bit harder than the SAT, but similar general idea. Here's what a lot of you don't know, is that in those testing rooms, there's, me, a bunch of other people taking the test at the same time, 30 or so people, a bunch of computers for testing and all that. Here's what you guys probably don't know, is that if I'd been allowed to speak in those rooms, if I'd been allowed to just 20 seconds of speaking, I would have been able to raise the scores of pretty much everybody in that room by about 100 points with one simple technique. And I'm going to teach you guys that technique right now. When I was looking around the room, I could see that a lot of people were thinking about, math or whatever. I could see that they were thinking. You can tell if somebody's thinking in their head. I could tell that a lot of people were really thinking about the problems. And a lot of them were doing the problems, thinking through them in their head, doing a lot of math in their head. And the reason that people do math in their head, of course, is because it feels faster. It makes you kind of feel smart. And for all I know, everybody in those rooms might have been smarter than me. I have no idea, but I do know that I got higher scores. The reason that I know that, by the way, is when you get a perfect score on the GMAT or the GRE or anything like that, they take your photograph, not like as a congratulations. They take your photograph because they want to make sure that you're not like a corporate spy who's trying to steal their questions. So anyway, it's a security measure. So in this room, I could have raised everybody's score by 100 points, and here's why. You see everybody doing these questions in their head, so them it feels faster. When you're doing a question in your head, it always feels faster. The reason that it feels faster, though, is not because it actually is faster to do a math problem in your head, but because when you do a math problem in your head, your mind is fully occupied. Your brain is fully absorbed with keeping all that mathematics straight, keeping all the variables and exponents and everything straight, and that takes a lot of concentration. So because your mind is fully dedicated to that task, your mind cannot keep track of time. Your mind doesn't have spare, resources, spare attention to keep track of time. It's putting everything it has on the task of managing the actual math problem. When your mind is occupied, time seems to go very quickly. People say time flies when you're having fun, but in reality, time just flies when you're occupied. When your mind is fully engrossed in something, time seems to go by instantly. We also have seen the other side of that, which is when your mind is not occupied, when you're super bored, when something's very boring going on, you're standing in line or something, time seems to go very, very slowly. It just seems to drag on and on. You might be in line for 1 minute. It feels like 2 hours have gone by. On the other hand, if you're having a really good time, if you're engaged in something, it could be video games. Video games are very, very engaging. They kind of take over your mind. You might be playing video games for 12 hours, but it feels like 20 minutes went by. You might be standing in line for 2 minutes. It feels like 12 hours went by. That's this subjective perception of time that's so critical to effective test taking, mathematics, all that kind of stuff, accuracy building. It comes from understanding this idea that if your mind is occupied, time goes quickly, and if your mind is not very occupied, time goes slowly. When you do math in your head, let's say, let me just give an example of a simple math equation. Let's say I have 3m plus 6 equals 11. Can I do this problem in my head? Yeah, of course. But in order to do it in my head, I have to concentrate. My mind has to be engaged for a moment to really be able to do this problem in my head. So let's get to the heart of this video. Go ahead and here's what you're going to do. I'm going to give you the instructions, then you're going to hit pause and do this, then you're going to come back to this video. Here are the instructions here. Go ahead and solve this equation. You have to solve it step by step. You have to write down every single step you do. Every step, like, writing -6 on both sides, etc. But you have to make a mistake on each step. So you're gonna write out the steps, but you have to get the wrong result at the end of every single step. Go ahead and pause the video for a moment, do that, and then come back to the video. Okay, if you did that exercise, what you discovered is that it takes actually a decent amount of concentration to do that, right? You actually had to think about it. You had to think hard to get the question wrong. Now we're going to do a slightly different tweak. I'm going to just give you a slightly different problem. Let's say, about the same level of difficulty. We'll do 4m plus 3 equals 9. This time you have to do the problem in your head and get the answer right. So you're going to go ahead and hit pause in this video, do the question in your head, get it right, and then come back to this video. Now, if you went ahead and did that problem in your head, what did you notice? That to do the problem in your head and get it right, what did you have to do? You had to concentrate. You had to put some focus, some energy, some attention into it. Doing that was necessary to be able to get this question right. Now, these two questions I gave you are about the same level of difficulty. Now I'm going to give you one more question. Try to get about the same level of difficulty. Okay. Now for this one, you're going to hit in a second when I tell you hit pause again on the video. This time you're going to write down the equation on a piece of paper, write down every single step, and you're going to have to get every step right and get the final answer right. You have to write down every single step. You can't skip a single step. Nothing in your head, everything on the paper. Go ahead and do that. Hit pause and then come back to this. What you probably noticed, if you did all the exercise, is that it took a lot of concentration to do it on paper and get it wrong. It took a lot of concentration to do it in your head and get it right, and it took almost no concentration or effort to do it on the paper and get it right. Doing it on paper and getting it right took the least amount of concentration. What you might not realize, it also probably took the least amount of time. It probably felt like it took the longest, but that's actually good. You want it when you're taking a test, you want it to feel like it's taking a long time. You want to feel like you have all the time in the world, right? You want it to be very, very slow. You want to finish early and have like nothing to do for the last 20 minutes. That's what you want. You don't want the test to feel fast. You don't want it to feel like it went by and you ran out of time. That's the last thing you want. You want it to be slow. You want it to feel like it's dragging. You want it to feel like you're Spider-Man moving so fast that the rest of the world is in slow motion. That's the goal. So what happened when you were doing this is it probably didn't feel fast to do it on paper, but it probably actually was fastest to do it on paper. Do it correctly. Doing it on paper wrong was probably the second fastest, and doing it in your head was probably the slowest. Now, the other important part about this is not just about speed, but also about endurance. If you take a look at some of your old practice tests, if you've ever done a practice test, if you look at your old practice tests, for most students, and I've obviously looked at a lot of practice tests from many students, it's usually as the test goes on, the accuracy goes down. Most people get pretty much the whole first section right, and a lot of stuff in the last section wrong. And people say, oh, that's because the last section is the hardest. The last section's not any harder than any other section. The last section, you're just more tired, so you make more mistakes. Now, how do we prevent that tiredness? Well, where does tiredness come from? It comes because you're using up energy. You're focusing, you're using up that focus, that concentration, all that kind of stuff. When you do the questions in your head, you're using the most focus, the most concentration, and so you're going to run out of steam the quickest. When you're doing everything out on the paper, not only is it faster, but also takes the least focus, so you don't run out of energy. When I was doing the GRE and GMAT, obviously I got everything right. I got perfect scores in both. But I wasn't tired at the end of the test. I just could have taken 4 more tests because I was writing everything down. It didn't take any effort. I didn't have to concentrate. I didn't have to do anything like that. I could have done 2, 3, 4, 5 more tests on that same day and been fine. The other very key aspect of writing out every step is that you've known that it's actually harder to do it wrong than to do it right when you're writing out the steps. Like you have to almost force yourself to be able to make a mistake. You have to concentrate hard to make a mistake, and you don't have to concentrate at all to get it right. So when you're doing the steps on paper, the chances of getting it wrong go way, way down. I've had many, many students, usually relatively advanced students, who they're really good at math, but they're only getting, say B's or something like that in their math class. For some of you guys who are struggling a bit more, that might be the thing you're shooting for, but for a lot of these students, they're getting B's, they want to be getting straight A pluses. The only thing that I changed for those students is I just had them write down every single step on the paper. If there wasn't much room on the test, they would just ask the teacher for extra paper. Sometimes it annoyed the teachers, but they still got hundreds on all their tests, so, who cares? You annoy the teacher a little bit, big deal. The advantages, again, of writing this down, of writing out every single step. And when I say every step, I mean like every step. Here's like writing out every step. You write -7 on both sides. Then you get 5m equals 6. Then you do over 5, and then divided by 5, and then you get m equals 6/5. I'm kind of typing it here, but obviously when you write it out, you use a vertical fraction. That is what it means to write out every single step. It's what I do on any kind of standardized test that I actually care what the score is going to be. This is how I get perfect scores on how I got perfect scores in the GRE, perfect scores in the GMAT. It doesn't come from being the smartest person or anything like that. It comes from using techniques that are fast, that make the room feel slow because they're so fast everything else is feeling slow, that are super accurate, that are very reliable, where it's actually harder to do it wrong than to do it right, and require basically no concentration at all. So you're able to have a lot of endurance while you're doing these.